right, y'all, this one's going to be for all my Kansas City Chiefs fans out there. I know that you're disappointed in the Super Bowl loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. The game was one-sided, but you're really just an offseason away from continuing the dynasty that y'all are actually right smack dab in the middle of, because you had the two baddest men on the planet, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. You also have a top 10 front office in all of sports worldwide. There's some things that we could take away from the Super Bowl, just as far as what you probably want to go out and target in the NFL draft. We'll talk about that today, but we'll also talk about some moves that you might want to make in free agency to ensure that the team is at least on par next year and maybe even better. Please do us a very big favor before we get started. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs, free agents in 2025. As y'all can see, there's a lot of names here. I want to start it off with the defense, though, because this one concerns me the most. There's a lot of front seven names here. And if you know football, then you understand that the championship teams are built in the trenches. Obviously, after we watch the Super Bowl, we should understand that. There's a few linebacker names here, but what I'm the most concerned about for the Kansas City Chiefs is the front four players. There's a lot of names right there. The good news for the Chiefs, though, this is a very deep front four class coming up in the 2025 draft. So I think that they can find several players at really good value, second through third, fourth, fifth rounds that will turn out to be very good players in the NFL. As far as linebackers go, it's not that deep of a draft for that. They'll probably have to go to free agency to find some players right there. And you might try to hold on to some of the names that we're seeing right now. But let's talk about the offense. The most names come right here, but they're mostly skill players. And skill players are a dime a dozen, especially for a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. Chiefs fans, y'all know that all too well. Doesn't really matter. The running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Patrick Mahomes is going to make it do what it always does. And the biggest concern for me with the offense is definitely with the offensive line. Up at the top, we're seeing Trey Smith. He's a guy that I think the Chiefs want to hold on to. I think that he wants to stay a Kansas City Chief. But the problem here, y'all, is the Chiefs will only have about $20.5 million in cap space as things look right now. And Trey Smith is probably going to be asking for about 21 plus million coming up in 2025. Now, there's some things that you can do with this contract that could, make it a little bit more back end heavy and kind of push that cost down the road. I would expect that that's what the Chiefs would try to get Trey Smith to do. And I have no reason to expect that he wouldn't be okay with doing that. But I do want to talk some more about the offensive line in depth, especially with some of these PFF numbers coming from the Super Bowl, to show you some spots that I think the Kansas City Chiefs need to target early on in the NFL draft. All right, y'all, these are the offensive line stats from the Super Bowl. This is with Pro Football Focus. I don't really pay attention to their grades. I take that with a grain of salt because I don't really like their grading scale, but there are some metrics that I think that we can learn from on their site. So right here, let's talk about the sacks, the pressures, and the pressure rate for each of the players that started in the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs on the offensive line. Up at the top, we see Trey Smith. Now, they're giving him credit with having given up one sack in the Super Bowl. Before, it was at 0 either way. He only gave up 4 pressures, and the pressure rate was 8.2%. Now, I think he had the toughest assignment out of any player playing on the offensive line for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, going up against Jalen Carter, who might be the most difficult player to block, period, point blank. And a lot of the times, Trey Smith was actually blocking him one-on-one. So I would say he's definitely a guy that the Chiefs want to hold on to. And like we said earlier, he probably wants to stay with the Chiefs. Really, the whole interior of the offensive line was not a problem for the Chiefs, as we're seeing with Humphrey, the center. His pressure rate was at 0, so he played outstanding. If you come on over to the other guard, I think his contract might be up as well. Don't quite quote me on that. I know that he was on that list, but I'm not 100% sure because I feel like he just got a contract extension not too long ago. Either way, his pressure rate was at 6.1%. He did give up 1 sack. But the real problem, y'all, as we all know, is going to come from Joe Thuney, who is really a guard that was playing at tackle. Man, his pressure rate was at 18.4%. They're only giving him credit with 1 sack. I think that is very, very generous. I think that just in looking at this, it's pretty obvious what the Chiefs need to do in the offseason. You need a left tackle. And I think that that could be a little bit of a problem for the Kansas City Chiefs because this isn't the deepest offensive tackle draft. Up at the top, you have guys like Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. They're both very good football players, but they're not prototype with some of their measurements and movements and things like that. In a typical draft, they'd probably be at the end of the first round, somewhere in the second round. But in this year's draft, they're for sure top 10 draft picks. So there's not a whole lot for the Chiefs to pick from as far as absolutely outstanding talent, even though there are some very good players. And really everyone that we'll be talking about today are going to be better than what we saw in the Super Bowl as far as I'm concerned. So looking at this list, we have up at the top Josh Conerly Jr., who's listed at 6'4", 315 pounds, coming from Oregon. Like we said, not prototype in a whole lot of places, not just with the first two players that we talked about, Campbell and also Banks, but really for everybody. There's not going to be a whole lot of prototype size. So Josh Conerly is undersized, but he's a very scrappy and very good football player. Actually, 6'4", 315, that's about center size in the NFL. Tackles are typically going to be about 6'5" and up, about 310 pounds and up. But looking at Josh Conerly's stats with Pro Football Focus from last season, it's very easy to tell why he's so highly rated. He only gave up 1 sack all season. His pressure rate was only at 1.9%, and he was a left tackle. That's exactly what I think the Kansas City Chiefs need the most. So just in watching this film, he's a guy that, like we talked about, he is a little bit undersized. His arms might be a little bit longer than his height is, if that makes sense. But he's a guy that has a strong punch. He has really good feet. He moves well, things like that. But he does struggle a little bit versus that bull rush. That would be my only knock on him. Now, he's a player that you would probably have to get in the mid to early first round, but he could potentially end up slipping and falling all the way down to the Kansas City Chiefs, or at least coming within a few picks in a place where they might feel comfortable enough to move up to go and get him if they really want to. So that will be my first guy for the Kansas City Chiefs to go out and target in the 2025 NFL Draft. Next would be Josh Simmons from Ohio State, listed at 6'5", 310 pounds. He also played at left tackle. Now, he's got that prototype size, and if he didn't have that season-ending knee injury, then he probably would have been the #1 overall offensive tackle in this year's draft. But because he did have that knee injury, teams are going to have to take their time with him and see, can they get him cleared medically? If the Kansas City Chiefs can get him cleared medically, he's a guy that I definitely think that they're going to go after. And we're seeing right here that he gave up 0 sacks, and his pressure rate was also at 0. I just think that he has everything that you want, not really many holes in his game at all. He's the most complete offensive tackle in this draft as far as I'm concerned. We'll see if maybe the Kansas City Chiefs can get lucky and land him at the end of the first round. Next, we have Armand Mimbu from Missouri, and he's listed at 6'3", 314 pounds, and he played at right tackle. This is a guy that I feel like should definitely be there for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, he's a very good football player, playing in the SEC, seeing great pass rushers pretty much every single week. But his size, to me, is a little bit of an issue. Him playing at right tackle is, to me, going to be a little bit of an issue as well. Like we said, man, it's not as easy as you might think to just go from the right side to the left side. For whatever reason, players tend to struggle with that. So that's going to be something that the Kansas City Chiefs will probably want to test out with him. How does he look playing on the left side? Because that's what the Chiefs need. Now, he gave up 0 sacks. His pressure rate looks really good also at 2.2%. And I've seen him struggle with some of the speed stuff. I've seen him struggle a little bit with the power as well. So he's not a complete tackle, but he still would be better than what I think the Chiefs put out there in the Super Bowl a couple of days ago. Last player is going to be Ariante Ursary. I hope I'm saying his name right. He is from Minnesota, listed at 6'6", 330 pounds. Now, that is prototype offensive tackle size for the NFL. And he played well last season also in the Big Ten, so facing really good competition in pass rushers. Only gave up 1 sack, 3.3% pressure rate. So his pressure rate is slightly higher than mostly everyone else that we looked at today. But I think that he's really good. He's a guy that could come in immediately, and I think he could plug in and start for you at left tackle. I just don't think that he's probably as good as some of these other players. He's going to project to be better down the line as he maybe gets some more reps and things like that, learns how to play as a pro. But he's a guy that I feel like the Chiefs could maybe get for a bargain. So we're talking about at the start of the second round. So it could turn into a situation where all the other tackles have been picked and Ariante is still there at the end of the first. And the Chiefs say, hey, with our first round pick, we're going to take a pass rusher, which you still need that. And then you can still go out and get Ariante at the top of the second. Now, obviously, you would have to move up to the top of the second to do that. But there's a whole lot of flexibility. The Chiefs could also try to move all the way up to the top 10 and get one of those other players that we talked about, like a Will Campbell or like a Kelvin Banks. I have no idea what they're going to do, but as we said to start this video off, you have an excellent front office and they will have all the answers to these questions. But biggest takeaway here, y'all, is offensive line, specifically tackle, should be the #1 priority for the offseason. Also feel like Trey Smith and, both of the guards should be major priorities. You want to hold on to those guys if you can make all those numbers work. Would not be surprised to see a Pat Mahomes or, any of those other veterans take that, pay cut, that hometown discount so that Trey Smith's numbers will make sense. But we will see what happens, because if Trey Smith goes, if anyone else goes from the offensive line, you might have to, draft you a guard. You might have to go get you another guard from free agency. So That's what the Chiefs need to do, is find that tackle for the future, find the best one that you possibly can, protect Patrick Mahomes, and you can kind of worry about defense later on. The defense will probably work itself out as long as you can fix the pass protection for Patrick Mahomes. But those are my thoughts, Kansas City Chiefs fans. Let me know yours down in the comments section. Please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.